to the Supreme Court's ruling on abortion. For continuing coverage anywhere, stream on the free CBS.
Good morning and welcome to CBS News Mornings. It is 7 o'clock here in New York City. I'm Anne-Marie Green, and here's a look at the stories grabbing our attention right now. Wyoming Republicans sent a strong message about the direction of the party. We're going to break down Congresswoman Liz Cheney's extraordinary loss, plus all the latest results from yesterday's primaries. Georgia prosecutors target Rudy Giuliani as they intensify their investigation into election interference. So we're going to look ahead to his appearance before a grand jury today and tell you what this means for Donald Trump's inner circle. We are following growing concerns over polio and monkeypox in the U.S. The New York City's health commissioner is going to be joining me later on this hour to answer all of your questions. Plus, the UN is calling the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan a pure catastrophe. We'll show you how families are suffering under Taliban rule. And a severe drought is devastating the water supply for millions of Americans out west.
I'm looking at spots that 30, 40 feet up the wall where my bait was hitting where I was fishing just a year ago.
So you're saying literally a year ago, this boat we're on right now would have been 30, 40 feet up there?
Yep. It's absolutely crazy.
We'll discuss mandatory water cuts on tap for millions of people as the Colorado River dries up. But, of course, before all of that, CBS News projects Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney has lost her party's primary for Wyoming's U.S. House seat. Trump-backed rival Harriet Hageman has won by a landslide. However, Cheney vowed to focus on keeping Donald Trump from returning to the Oval Office. So Bradley Blackburn has the very latest on how this all unfolded. Bradley, good morning.
Hey, Anne-Marie, good morning. Cheney has served 3 terms in Congress, holding the same seat that her father, Dick Cheney, held decades ago. But last night, she lost her primary race by more than 30 points. It's proof of former President Trump's power to influence Republican voters and take down a Wyoming political dynasty.
This primary election is over, but now the real work begins.
With her mother and father, Dick Cheney, steps away, a defiant Congresswoman Liz Cheney conceded her primary bid for re-election in Wyoming to Harriet Hageman.
No office in this land is more important than the principles that we are all sworn to protect.
The 3-term incumbent was defeated by Hageman, an attorney who embraced former President Trump's support, as well as his baseless claims that the 2020 election was stolen.
Wyoming has spoken on behalf of everyone who is concerned that the game is becoming more and more rigged against them.
Cheney faced an uphill battle for re-election after her vote to impeach former President Trump in the wake of the Capitol Hill riot. She later became vice chair of the January 6th committee.
We must be very clear-eyed about the threat we face and about what is required to defeat it. I have said since January 6th that I will do whatever it takes to ensure Donald Trump is never again anywhere near the Oval Office, and I mean it.
The former president took to social media to celebrate Cheney's defeat, writing in part, "Now she can finally disappear into the depths of political oblivion, where I am sure she will be much happier than she is right now."
I'm a Trump fan, and I think she just sort of turned her back on him.
Of the 10 Republicans who voted to impeach Trump and faced a primary challenge, only 2 have prevailed and will go on to the general election in November. Cheney has called her own party, quote, very sick, and believes that if it can heal, it will take years. Anne-Marie, this defeat may not be a surprise, but just 2 years ago, before January 6th, it would have been unimaginable.
It certainly would have been unimaginable, but I don't think we've seen the last of Liz Cheney. What's next for her?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. President Trump says she's headed to political oblivion, but it's pretty clear that she does not agree. She remains in office until January, so she'll continue leading the January 6th committee, meaning that she will be highly visible during any hearings this fall. And her allies, Anne-Marie, say that she is considering a presidential bid in 2024.
We are going to talk a little bit more about that later. In the meantime, Alaska also held primary elections last night. What can you tell us about the races there?
Yeah, Senator Lisa Murkowski is trying to fend off a Trump-backed challenger. Both are going to advance from this vote because Alaska is now using something called ranked choice voting. Meanwhile, Alaska's former governor and 2008 vice presidential candidate Sarah Palin is aiming to complete a political comeback. She is running in a special election to fill the House seat of Congressman Don Young, who died back in March. And election results in Alaska aren't expected to be announced for several days, if not longer, because of this new ranked choice scheme. Multiple candidates can advance to a general election, Anne-Marie.
Yeah. Alaska's process is quite complicated, so it's difficult to predict how that's going to shake out. Bradley, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, in the meantime, Rudy Giuliani is set to testify before a grand jury in Georgia today. It's looking into alleged efforts by former President Trump and others to influence and overturn the 2020 election results in that state. Giuliani has been notified that he's a target of the investigation, not just a witness. However, it's unclear if he'll answer any questions. President Biden has signed the sweeping Inflation Reduction Act into law. Democrats say it will fight climate change and allows Medicare to negotiate prescription prices. However, Republicans oppose the legislation, calling it a tax and spending spree.
Let me say from the start, with this law, the American people won and the special interests lost.
Democrats, more than any other majority in history, are addicted to spending other people's money, regardless of what we as a country can afford.
The measure passed with no GOP support in both the House and the Senate. So, of course, there's so much more to talk about when it comes to politics. Coming up at 7:45, a CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe is going to be joining us. He's going to break down exactly what is included in this measure. In the meantime, North Korea has fired 2 suspected cruise missiles into the sea early this morning. Pyongyang has been ramping up its missile testing, launching more than 30 ballistic weapons this year alone. And this all comes as the U.S. and South Korea gear up for joint military drills next week to counter the growing threat. The federal government announced unprecedented mandatory water cuts as an extreme drought grips Southwest states. Arizona and Nevada have been advised to use less water from the Colorado River. And experts say if reservoirs hit what's called dead pool, water would not flow under the Glen Canyon and Hoover dams, limiting the supply to millions of people from Phoenix all the way to Los Angeles. The 7 states that depend on water from Lake Mead missed the federal deadline to announce how they would cut additional water next year. Around 40 million people depend on the Colorado River for water. NASA is gearing up for a major liftoff. We have more details on the rollout of its powerful new rocket ahead of an expected launch later on this month. That's coming up next. Plus, New York City's health commissioner joins me after the break to answer all your questions about polio. We will tell you why officials believe the virus may have been spreading across the city since April. But first, it is 7:07 here on the East Coast. That means it's time to check your local weather.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready? A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging winds.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me?
We got it. We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Well, the time now is 4:11 in Phoenix, Arizona. We are continuing to monitor the drought that's fueling a water crisis in the western U.S. In the meantime, it is 7:11 here in New York and the rest of the East Coast. CBS News Mornings is back with a look at some of the stories that you may have missed while you were offline. NASA began rolling out its new 322-foot-tall Mega Moon rocket last night at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The rocket will lift off on August 29th to send an uncrewed capsule on a mission around the moon and back. It is part of NASA's Artemis program, which aims to put humans back on the moon. Uvalde officials will meet next week to discuss firing School District Police Chief Pete Arredondo. He's been criticized for his role as on-scene commander while officers waited more than an hour to confront the shooter who killed two teachers and 19 children at Robb Elementary School in May. And First Lady Jill Biden continues to isolate after testing positive for COVID while on vacation in South Carolina with the president and their family. The White House says that she has mild symptoms and she is taking Paxlovid. The CDC says the polio virus was found in April wastewater in a sample from a county very, very close to New York City, suggesting that the disease, in fact, could have been spreading there earlier than we previously knew. Health officials have been investigating at least one case of paralysis from polio, at least one case of paralysis from polio has been confirmed in the region. In the meantime, we're going to have a little bit more on this. We want to bring in Dr. Ashwin Vasan. He is the New York City Health Commissioner. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Just to make it clear that the virus had been found in wastewater from dating back to April, and there's one case of paralysis that's being investigated in the greater New York area. So let us talk about just the situation. And when you hear that they've discovered samples of the virus in wastewater going back to April, what's your reaction?
Well, it's definitely concerning to me as a public health physician, and considering polio is a virus that's been around for a long time, but for which we've had a very clear preventive solution, a vaccine, since 1955. So it's definitely concerning. Can I say definitively that polio has never appeared prior in our wastewater? No, because we didn't routinely sample it. But remember, this is in the context of a case of flaccid paralysis in Rockland County, just outside of New York City. So taking those 2 points together, the existence of it in wastewater in upstate New York, as well as here in New York City, as well as the case of paralysis, makes it really concerning that there's a version of the polio virus circulating that can cause real disease and disability.
So then at what point should we be concerned? At what point would you start to say, no, these numbers aren't looking good?
Well, we're tracking, and we track across the country, pediatric polio vaccination rates. Why? Because most kids, in order to go to school, need to have completed their entire polio vaccine series. So if you're a child that hasn't, and you're the parent of a child that hasn't, this is really a call to action to get your child vaccinated now. Don't delay. There are certain communities that tend to delay vaccination until their children reach public school age, and that's a very dangerous proposition. And we're seeing this in our vaccination rates in New York City. Certain communities as low, certain zip codes as low as 56% completion rates in the 6 month through 5 years old age range. And so this is really a call to us to say, now's the time to redouble our efforts and to redouble our emphasis on vaccination, a tried and true and proven tool since 1955.
So, if you're amongst, a member of the population that feels uneasy about the polio vaccine, say you haven't vaccinated your kid, or you're an adult and, you haven't been vaccinated, are there certain factors that people should consider when seeking out a vaccination, or should everyone just get it?
Everyone should get it. This has been, as I said, and I'll say it again, it's been around since 1955. It's incredibly safe. Millions and millions of Americans and nearly billions of people around the world have been vaccinated against polio, to the point where we were even considering that polio could be close to eradication. And sadly, due to vaccine misinformation, due to anti-vaccine movements, we're starting to see a decline in polio vaccination rates. And that's troubling to us in public health. So now's our chance, especially coming out of COVID, where we've seen overall pediatric vaccination rates decline. We want to redouble our efforts, especially now. We're all going back. Our kids are all going back to school. My kids are going back to school. It's a chance for us to re-engage parents to say, go get your children vaccinated now as we enter into this new school year. It's never been more important.
So speaking about sort of returning to school, and the other virus that's been making headlines is, of course, monkeypox. So I got to ask you, any concern over the level of monkeypox with the return of kids into the classroom?
Well, we certainly understand that there's anxieties and questions around how monkeypox spreads, how MPV spreads, and what's the risk to children. And there have been a few isolated cases of contact. The thing to remember is that in general, and what we're seeing in this outbreak, is that MPV, monkeypox virus, spreads through close skin-to-skin contact, and it's usually prolonged contact. And in this particular outbreak, that's been associated with sexual contact. It does not spread as easily through surfaces and it certainly doesn't spread easily through brushing against someone or handshaking. So our kids are not at widespread risk. That said, we have put out and are putting out in New York City, and I know that other jurisdictions are considering, guidance to schools, to principals, to parents about just what to look out for and how to keep their environments safe. Obviously, there's isolation guidance if you suspect your child has a rash that could be monkeypox, and talking to providers about what to look for and what to test for. But there isn't widespread risk to children right now, and I think I want to try to reduce that anxiety, even though I understand that people are tuned up and anxious, especially coming out of 2.5 years of COVID.
Yeah, definitely. Dr. Avasan, thank you very much.
Of course, anytime. Thank you.
So we're keeping a close eye on Rudy Giuliani today. He's expected to testify before a Georgia grand jury investigating alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Our very own Jeff Pegues joins me after the break with all the latest details on that. And coming up later on Red and Blue, we're going to take a closer look at Mike Pence's possible presidential bid as he travels to New Hampshire today. You can stream that conversation in our 6 p.m. Eastern hour. We'll be right back.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready?
A
generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail. We're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Rudy Giuliani is scheduled to appear before a grand jury in Georgia today. It's looking into alleged efforts by former President Trump and allies to influence and overturn the 2020 election. According to Giuliani's lawyer, he is now a target of the criminal investigation. Jeff Begase is following this story in Atlanta. Jeff, good morning.
Good morning, Anne Marie. Yeah, can you imagine being told that you're the target of an investigation like this? But that is the situation that Rudy Giuliani finds himself in this morning as he shows up here in Atlanta at this courthouse. We know he will be here. We just don't know how cooperative he will be. For weeks after the 2020 election, Rudy Giuliani led efforts to keep former President Trump in power by spreading false accusations about widespread fraud.
The recount being done in Georgia will tell us nothing, because these fraudulent ballots will just be counted again.
These actions are at the center of the special grand jury's probe in Georgia, investigating whether former President Trump and his allies violated laws in trying to flip the 2020 election results in the state. Efforts addressed by the January 6th committee earlier this year.
Nothing irregular happened in the counting, and the allegations made by Mr. Giuliani were false.
After learning he was a target of the grand jury, Giuliani claimed that he was simply doing his job as Trump's attorney.
When you start turning around lawyers into defendants when they're defending their clients, we're starting to live in a fascist state.
There is worrying signs. If you are Giuliani, or representing Giuliani that a prosecution might be in his future.
Legal experts say the grand jury could possibly be building a broader case that might implicate the former president.
Rudy Giuliani, unlike other folks, was part of some decision-making processes behind the attempt to overturn the 2020 election. And that suggests to me that the DA is potentially pursuing some kind of conspiracy-based charge.
The Associated Press reporting this morning that Jenna Ellis, who was another member of the Trump legal team, has also been called to testify before this special grand jury. And, you know, you don't have to have a law degree to figure out where this could be going. She is yet another person in the former president's orbit. And so there are a lot of people who are watching this case who believe that Fani Willis, the DA here, is building a case that leads toward the former president.
Yeah,
Anne-Marie.
And speaking of that, another sort of longtime supporter of the president, Senator Lindsey Graham, has also been called to testify now. Now, unlike Rudy Giuliani, he's not the target of an investigation. I presume he's being called as a witness. But what are prosecutors hoping to hear from him?
Well, listen, I mean, this case is evolving fairly quickly, and while he may be a witness this week, as was the case with Giuliani, next week, you just don't know. He has been ordered to testify. He's another one who has been trying to delay or squash this subpoena and his testimony, but as was the case with Rudy Giuliani, when he took on the DA here in court and tried to delay his testimony, he lost. And not only did he lose, but he was sort of embarrassed because his argument was, listen, I just had a medical procedure.
Wow.
A lot of people.
Early morning enthusiasm.
A lot of people out here waiting for Giuliani to come.
Clearly.
That's just some guy walking by. You know, it's tough waking up in the morning.
Too much coffee.
Anyway, yeah, too much coffee. I know what that's like. So let me just tell you, Fani Willis, the DA here, she's not messing around, okay? Because as I was saying before I was interrupted, Giuliani has been trying to push off his testimony. A judge told him, you got to testify. Go down there to Atlanta to testify. His attorney argued, well, the former mayor just had a medical procedure. He can't fly. Meanwhile, the DA's team here was doing a little investigation and found out that Giuliani had allegedly purchased tickets to Europe around this time to fly to Europe. So the DA basically saying, listen, I can get you a train ticket or a bus ticket. You need to get down here. So he'll be here today. Don't know quite how he got here. Maybe he took Amtrak. Perhaps he took a bus. We don't know.
Unbelievable.
But perhaps that will be a question he will answer today. We'll see.
Yeah, really interesting. And, you know, you're good to point out Lindsey Graham's situation. He, of course, made a couple of phone calls to election officials down there in Georgia. And, you know, I'm sure the content of those phone calls will be scrutinized by prosecutors right now in this investigation. Jeff Vigues, thank you. So we're following several major developing stories in our next half hour. Congresswoman Liz Cheney concedes to her Trump-backed rival in Wyoming. We're going to have more details on the extraordinary primary and what these results mean for politics in America. And President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act into law. Senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe is standing by with more details on the legislation and what's next for the president. Plus, Afghanistan is suffering from a potentially catastrophic humanitarian crisis. Foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tayeb reports from the front lines as women, children, and families face starvation. We'll be right back.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready? A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail. We're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Welcome back to CBS News Mornings. The time now is 7:31. Let's get you caught up on some of the news that you may have missed. First Lady Jill Biden is isolating this morning after testing positive for COVID. And the White House made the announcement yesterday saying that she has mild symptoms and she is taking Paxlovid. She was vacationing with the president in South Carolina when she was diagnosed. So she will remain there for at least 5 days. Taiwan and China are once again conducting live military drills. Beijing restarted its latest show of force after Taiwan's president met with another U.S. congressional delegation this week. And a new report exposes more details about the Justice Department's investigation into former President Trump's handling of documents. According to the New York Times, FBI agents interviewed Pat Cipollone and Patrick Philbin. Both worked as top lawyers in the Trump White House. Congresswoman Liz Cheney has suffered an extraordinary loss in Wyoming's House GOP primary race. Trump-backed challenger Harriet Hageman defeated her after promoting the former president's false claim of voter fraud throughout the race. Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent Robert Costa is in Jackson, Wyoming with the very latest. Robert, good morning. When I spoke to you just a couple days ago, you indicated that it was not looking good for Congresswoman Cheney, and I guess it turned out to be the case.
Good morning. Good to be with you here in Jackson, Wyoming. The sun has not even risen yet in this mountain town. But it's true. This race was a contest that was pretty much understood to be going against Cheney. The polls showed her down by about 30 points going into Election Day. But when you step back, you really recognize that this race was a prism into this moment in the Republican Party, the Trump wing at war with many traditional Republicans. And though Congresswoman Cheney did concede in this race, she did not concede in the battle for the future of the Republican Party.
Our work is far from over.
Surrounded by members of a family that have dominated Wyoming politics for decades, including her father, former Vice President Dick Cheney, Congresswoman Cheney accepted defeat.
2 years ago, I won this primary with 73% of the vote. I could easily have done the same again, but it would have required that I go along with President Trump's lie about the 2020 election. That was a path I could not and would not take.
But Cheney was more defiant than wistful, warning Republican voters that their embrace of former President Trump is a threat to democracy.
No American should support election deniers for any position of genuine responsibility.
Cheney is now the 8th out of 10 House Republicans who voted for Trump's second impeachment following the Capitol attack to be leaving Congress. Trump posted last night that Cheney can finally disappear into the depths of political oblivion, and he congratulated Hageman, who has pushed baseless claims about fraud in the 2020 election.
We're all very grateful to President Trump, who recognizes that Wyoming has only one congressional representative, and we have to make it count.
But Wyoming's Republican primary voters ultimately had the final say.
Liz Cheney has done absolutely nothing in the last 6 months except her hatred for Trump.
Cheney's allies say she is considering a bid for the White House in 2024. But before making that decision, she plans to keep busy as the vice chair of the January 6th committee, which continues to probe the former president's conduct.
I will do whatever it takes to ensure Donald Trump is never again anywhere near the Oval Office, and I mean it.
It was also primary night up there in Alaska. Former Governor Sarah Palin, the 2008 Republican vice presidential nominee, is projected to now be in the general election in her House race, though Palin is still waiting to see if she will fill the remainder of her predecessor's term. On the Senate side, Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski, a more moderate Republican in the Senate GOP conference, she is projected to now be in the general election. So is a Trump-backed candidate, Kelly Tshibaka. Anne-Marie?
That should be interesting. But let us talk about Liz Cheney again. You know, she has alluded to possibly running in 2024 in the presidential campaign. She also said that she's going to do whatever it takes, whatever is needed to keep Donald Trump out of the Oval Office again. But I wonder, you know, what's your latest reporting on how she might do that? With this major loss, does she still have political capital? Does she still have the ability to fundraise? How's she going to go about doing that?
She raised over $13 million for this race. She lost, but she proved that she has a national fundraising base, and that's in part due to her tenure in the House leadership, her family roots in the Republican Party. It goes without saying. Her father's Dick Cheney, the former vice president of the United States. There was some breaking news just a few minutes ago. Congresswoman Cheney and her team have decided to set up a new organization in the coming weeks that will advocate for her views, her belief that American democracy is under threat. And many of her allies and even her critics see this move post-primary so quickly as something that's bringing her closer to a possible 2024 presidential bid. The question is, should she move forward and try to have a coalition that's Democrats, independents, and Trump skeptical or anti-Trump Republicans? How does that move forward in American politics in a system so dominated by the two-party primary process?
That is a great point. You know, for any other political figure other than Donald Trump, the last couple of weeks should have been terrible. You know, he had to sit for a civil deposition in New York where he had to plead the fifth. He's facing a criminal investigation in New York. And then, of course, you know, these allegations of taking home top secret documents and refusing to hand them over. This should be terrible for your political fortunes. But somehow, Donald Trump remains a formidable contender for the 2024 presidential nomination. How is he keeping his grip on the power when it comes to the Republican Party?
When you look at former President Trump's political standing, when I talk to both voters in the Republican Party and high-ranking officials and elected officials, it's evident that there are two tracks. There's the Trump legal track and the Trump political track. On the Trump legal track, he is facing many challenges, mounting challenges, to say the least. When the Department of Justice and FBI agents raid your home to find documents, not always a perfect legal situation, though we'll have to see how that plays out. He has not been charged with any crime on that front. It's just an ongoing investigation. He's also facing legal scrutiny in New York from the state attorney general, from the Manhattan district attorney, and, of course, from congressional investigators on Capitol Hill about his role in and around the January 6th Capitol attack. But the Trump political front is a place where he is scoring some primary wins. In fact, many of his candidates are doing very well in red states and states that lean a little bit more conservative. And he has positioned himself as someone who could be the 2024 Republican presidential nominee. Though it's important to recognize the party is bigger than Trump. He may be dominant, but for example, Glenn Youngkin, the Virginia governor who won last year, he was in Jackson, Wyoming, this town, just a few days ago, speaking to Republican donors. We're told by our sources he's making inroads with them. So you have Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, former Vice President Mike Pence making a trip to New Hampshire this week. A lot of others who could be rivals, different contenders in 2024. They're making their own moves, even though Trump remains a powerful force.
Before I let you go, let me ask you a quick question about the primaries in Alaska. Sarah Palin, the rise of Sarah Palin, who, really, Robert, was sort of Trump before Trump. A lot of, the things that she sort of campaigned on were very similar. And then the TV personality that she developed into are certainly many of the same things that Donald Trump advocates as well. But now the political landscape is awash with Trump-like candidates. I wonder just, how Sarah Palin is doing in Alaska.
It's an important point you made, because when the story of Trump is ultimately told by history, my guess is that the Sarah Palin story will be part of how we understand the Trump story. When I began my reporting career, it was around 2008, the time of the economic collapse, the trouble on Wall Street, the different bailouts of financial institutions. Inside the Republican Party at that time, there was anger at the establishment and what happened on foreign policy with President George W. Bush. There was anger about the bailouts of different banks, and that anger led to grievance inside the base, and it led to what would soon be called populism and nationalism inside the Republican Party, and an anger towards the national press, towards established institutions in this country. That fueled Palin's vice presidential candidacy in 2008. It fueled the Tea Party movement in 2009, 2010, among many other things. Their vitriol and their dislike for President Obama, among others. But then Palin, the Tea Party, essentially coupled together with an anti-immigration reform sentiment inside the GOP and led to the Trump movement in 2014, 2015, 2016. And that coalescing of all those different forces in the GOP is still with us today.
Yeah, and Alaska is implementing sort of a novel election process. So it's going to be a while probably till we see really who's emerging as a front runner in these races. Robert, thank you very much. President Biden signed a massive bill called the Inflation Reduction Act into law after months of negotiations. Democrats say that the measure addresses climate change and healthcare costs. So for more on this, we want to bring in senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. So Ed, this is supposed to be, it's called the Inflation Reduction Act, but I gotta say, I feel like the title's a little misleading based on all the stuff that we know that's in there. So he's gonna have to sell it, because I don't know if Americans are going to feel any sort of immediate relief from inflation. So how is the president going to sell this?
Well, and no one who voted for this or who approved of it or signed off on it says that there's immediate relief for inflation, but they believe over time, and certainly beginning in the next year, it could help lead to that. The president, congressional Democrats, members of the Biden cabinet will all be part of selling this in the coming weeks. Remember, it's got the largest federal investment in climate change, or the fight for climate change. millions of people on Medicare and the Affordable Care Act will see savings in their health care plans because of changes made. There will be new taxes on billion-dollar corporations that pay almost nothing to the U.S. government. Now the IRS will be able to hire more people to help enforce tax laws, although the Treasury Department says those new hires and the new enforcement mechanisms they put in place will only go after those big tax cheats or those larger companies. All that Democrats see as wins for the working class or for American families versus special interests who were opposed to this. And you heard the president yesterday using far more optimistic language than he's used in recent months to sort of say, look, this isn't about today. This isn't about yesterday. It's about tomorrow. It's about the future. It's about restoring faith in democracy. It's about fixing the American economy. It's about showing people that government can do big things. And they believe, again, we were with working Americans, working class Americans, by passing this legislation and other things in the last 2 years. Republicans were with special interests, and they voted in unison completely against this plan, which, when it's polled issue by issue, is quite popular, even though people may not totally understand what exactly is in this legislation.
Well, he's going to need Americans to buy what he's selling as we move towards the midterm elections. Before I let you go, I have to ask you about Jill Biden. She is in isolation after testing positive for COVID. It's not bad to be in isolation in the same place where you were vacationing, I suppose, but you can't be around her family. Any updates on her condition?
Not as of this morning, but she does remain in Kiowa Island, South Carolina, where the Bidens were holding their first part of the summer vacation, and she'll stay there, the White House says, until she tests negative twice. Got to wait about 5 days for that to happen anyway, so she'll be there probably the rest of this week. The president continues the second part of the Biden family vacation up at their home in Wilmington through the rest of this week. We anticipate he'll head to Rehoboth Beach, where they have a vacation home as well, perhaps over the weekend into next week. But remember, they didn't get a vacation much of last year, at least a formal one, because of the withdrawal from Afghanistan. So the White House is happy to have him out there relaxing ahead of what they anticipate will be a busy fall. And, of course, we wish the First Lady all the best.
Indeed. Of course, she is double vaxxed and boosted and all that good stuff.
Exactly.
Ed, thank you very much. Well, the UN is calling Afghanistan's hunger crisis a pure catastrophe. Around 25 million Afghans live in poverty. Food prices are soaring. And officials are worried that many malnourished children will not survive the upcoming winter. MTS Tayeb is in Kabul with the latest.
Afghanistan is starving. And these babies are among the most malnourished. At Kabul's Indira Gandhi Children's Hospital, infants from across the country are brought here for specialized treatment. This mother tells us her 4-month-old son, Murtaza, weighs just 6.5 pounds.
Your son is so small, so frail. You must be very worried about him.
Yes, we are so worried, she says. She lost one son already and fears she will lose him, too. Hunger has long plagued Afghanistan, but since the Taliban's takeover 1 year ago, the Biden administration froze billions in state bank assets, and international donors pulled financial support. But doctors here say it's people who are paying the price.
1
or 2 malnourished children die here every day, he says.
You lose 1 or 2 children a day.
Yes, unfortunately. In the Taliban's Afghanistan, hunger stalks nearly every street. The number of people waiting outside of bakeries hoping for a handout of bread is only growing. Each loaf costs just 11 cents. But even that's too expensive for Najibullah, who works as a day laborer. Lately, work has been hard to come by.
The Taliban have been in power for a year now. Are they helping you?
I haven't received a penny from them, he says.
So life is worse for you under the Taliban?
Yes, it's terrible, he says. It's a slow death for us. Life is not worth living when there's no food and no work. As the sun sets, a local resident offers to buy bread for the dozens of men and women who have been waiting outside the bakery. The total cost isn't more than a few dollars. But for everyone here, it means they and their families won't go to bed hungry, at least not tonight.
Now, aid is trickling into Afghanistan, but nowhere near the levels before the U.S.'s withdrawal just under a year ago, and certainly not enough to solve this humanitarian catastrophe. Anne-Marie.
MTS, thank you. Well, tennis icon Serena Williams suffers a major blow on the court. Coming up, we'll have the highlights from yesterday's match in Cincinnati, plus more details on her expected retirement.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready? A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've never done an interview like this before. That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News.
What's your message to consumers?
They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yes. We found it.
You're kidding me?
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
The peak of the Atlantic hurricane season is fast approaching, and we're tracking all the latest threats in the tropics. So we're going to bring in meteorologist Jim Cantori from our partners at the Weather Channel. Jim, what do people need to pay attention to now and then in the days to come?
Anne-Marie, we are watching an area off of Nicaragua and Honduras this morning, which will scoot on to the north and west. It's really a tropical wave, but once it makes its way across land, then it's free to develop potentially in the Gulf of Mexico. This disturbance will have a lot more time over water than, let's say, the last one did, 98L, and you saw the rainfall that produced for South Texas. This, too, could bring some beneficial rain into the state in Texas as we go on in time. So here is this morning, again, big convective bubble. There's no surface low associated with it, but pressures are lower, which is something we look for as meteorologists for, hey, maybe this thing's coming to life. And you kind of get an idea from looking at this model here where this thing is going to track as we go on in time. Believe it or not, the rainfall in the southwest is from 98L, which is that disturbance that dumped South Texas just about a half a week ago. All sorts of moisture in through here, upper level low, aiding, bringing this moisture and focusing it on Arizona, New Mexico, West Texas, up into southern Utah, and even into southwest Colorado. As a matter of fact, there is a moderate chance for flooding in through here. They're even worried about some of the rivers in southern Arizona, which is kind of amazing. So 3 to 5 inches, a possibility here with rainfall still to come as we go through the next several days. And then we still have to wait as we go to next week What happens with this tropical system? Does it develop? Does it enhance the rainfall here, or is it going to be more in Texas? Hey, remember, you can watch the Weather Channel on cable or live on your favorite TV streaming devices. And Anne-Marie, as we mentioned, it looks like parts of the Southwest could get some needed rainfall as well in other areas that haven't been flooding.
That'll be some good. Thank you. Well, stock futures fell flat this morning. Futures tied to the Dow fell 185 points, and this comes ahead of new retail earnings set to be announced this week. Elon Musk set the record straight after he says he was just joking about buying English soccer team Manchester United. But the club's shares spiked amid the now fake announcement. And inflation is taking a toll on Britain as consumer prices jumped last month. Inflation rose more than 10% from a year earlier, mainly because of high food prices. Inflation is still a few months away from its expected peak. Well, today we are kicking off a special series of reports to help you better understand today's uncertain economy. Many worry about whether or not we are in a recession, and if so, what it means for them and their wallets. Some economists say that the truth of the matter is, if we are, it's certainly not our first, and historically, it won't be our worst.
We have to say, look, if there's a hurricane coming, we prepare for the hurricane, we prepare for the storm, and then we wait it out. Back in 2006, we absolutely knew we were going into a recession. Everyone knew. It was a question of when it was going to occur.
Tonight, most of last week's Wall Street gains wiped out in a single day. And now it's official. We are in a recession.
As we moved through 2008, those storm clouds really grew to becoming full-on thunderstorms, if not torrential, problematic storms. In many ways, what started the decline was a precipitous fall in home prices. This particular recession, I think there's a lot of differences with distinction between today and perhaps where we were in 2007, 2008, 2009.
Well, you can catch our full report on the history of recessions in America later on today. And for the next week and a half, we are going to break down the big picture by stripping away the jargon and illustrating the real life impact of inflation on everyday Americans. And looking at some pop culture news now, Solange Knowles is set to become the first Black woman to compose music for the New York City Ballet. The singer-songwriter is working on an original score for the company's annual Fall Fashion Gala that will take place next month. And we are following another loss for Serena Williams. The 40-year-old tennis star lost to 19-year-old Emma Raducanu at last night's Western and Southern Open in Ohio. Williams is expected to end her career at the U.S. Open later on this month. The time now is 7:56. Here's a look at what's coming up today. Former Vice President Mike Pence is in New Hampshire. He's speaking at the Politics and Eggs event, and he considers possibly running for president in 2024. So stay with us for any major updates following his speech there. In about an hour, former Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani is expected to appear before a grand jury in Georgia. He's the target of a criminal investigation into election interference. However, it's unclear if he'll answer any questions or plead the fifth during today's hearing. Plus, the World Health Organization will hold a news conference addressing monkeypox and COVID cases. Officials are expected to give an update on the global response to the virus. That is set for 9 a.m. Eastern. And coming up in our 9 o'clock hour, foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tayyab joins us from Afghanistan, where the country is facing a humanitarian crisis. He'll give us an update on the dire conditions amid growing fears of starvation and famine. You can stream that conversation at 9:30 Eastern. If you are heading out the door, take us with you. You can access all of our CBS News national and local streams for free anytime, anywhere on the CBS News app. CBS Mornings is next. I'll see you in an hour.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready? A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct. Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News.
What's your message to consumers?
They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment